Okay, thank you. Welcome to the City of Bellevue regular council meeting for January 18th, 2022. We're meeting on a Tuesday because yesterday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I want to thank the city and the Bellevue Alumni Chapter of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the president, Wanda Egan's, for the wonderful event yesterday. It was remarkable, and it also had a health fair, which was really good. Could you please clerk do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
Oh.
Councilmember Robertson.
You're not hearing me?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm here.
I knew you were here. Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
Thank you. And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening there are 6 pre-registered speakers. And with that, I will call the first speaker, who is Paul Bruno. Mr. Bruno, can you hear me?
Charmaine, thank you.
Yeah, your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, City Council members, and City Manager Miyake. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and a belated Happy New Year to you all. My name is Paul Bruno. I live in Bellevue and truly appreciate everything the City Council has done to make Bellevue a wonderful place to live. In October of last year, I had the pleasure as a member of the People for Climate Action and as a citizen of Bellevue to virtually meet with most of you to discuss the Environmental Stewardship Initiative. We discussed the comparisons to 5 other cities in the U.S. In similar size to Bellevue that also have environmental initiatives. However, there was one major difference. The full-time employees at each of those cities exceeded Bellevue's by anywhere from 3 to 9 times as many. This has contributed to these 5 cities successfully executing their plans and in many cases, a reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions upward to 26% during the past decade. So in order to rapidly implement the many actions listed in Bellevue's December 2020 Environmental Stewardship Plan and the additional measures that will surely be needed, more full-time staff positions must be promptly added in both 2022 this year and also next year. Otherwise, it's highly unlikely that the city will be able to implement measures with sufficient urgency and diligence to cut community-wide emissions 50% by the year 2030. To that, we ask the city add $400,000 to the 2022 budget to be used for hiring 3 more staff dedicated to rapid environmental stewardship plan implementation. And I might add also that the 2 current employees, Jennifer Ewing and Anna, I'm sorry, I can't remember her last name, are really doing a tremendous job, but they need help. As always, the People for Climate Action stand ready to assist the city in any way possible to help with the critical initiative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. The next speaker on the list this evening is Rachel Doyle. Miss Doyle, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you
Your
so
time
much.
begins. Yeah, your time begins now.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'm Rachel Doyle. I use she, her pronouns, and I just want to agree with the speaker who went before me about the need to expand the staff so that we can actually achieve all of the environmental concerns that are happening. I think Bellevue has done so many wonderful forward-thinking things, and properly staffing the environmental group would help make sure that we'll be able to continue all of these wonderful programs in the future and be conscious of the climate chaos that is descending upon us if we don't prepare. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle. The next speaker on the list is April Stevens. Ms. Stevens, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, and City Council members and Bellevue City staff. Thank you all for your dedication to the City of Bellevue and for all the time and energy you give in helping to constantly improve the quality of life in our city. My name is April Stevens, and I'm speaking to you this evening as a Bellevue resident and citizen concerned about the future of our environment. And while I applaud your stated goal of a 50% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2030, I ask you, what is the point of having a goal if there is no authentic and honest plan to reach it? The Bellevue Environmental Stewardship Plan is lofty, but in order to implement the many stated actions, it's my understanding that even your own staff acknowledges more full-time environmental stewardship staff positions must be promptly added in both 2022 and 2023. So to this end, I ask the city to add enough funds to the Environmental Stewardship Plan budget to hire 3 additional staff this year. Once again, thank you for letting me speak and for taking my comments into consideration. And thank you again for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. The next speaker on our list is Betsy Hummer. Ms. Hummer, can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, I can hear you, Charmaine.
All right, thank you. Your time begins now.
Great. I am Betsy Hummer. I currently serve as the chair of the East Bellevue Community Council. And Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, and council members, I'm here tonight to ask you to not actively support House Bill 1769. Representative Larry Springer from the 45th District recently introduced the House Bill 1769 to artificially sunset community councils. At the regular meeting of East Bellevue Community Council on January 4th, 2022, East Bellevue Community Council, consisting of myself as chair, vice chair Ron Epstein, alternate vice chair Hassan Dhananjaya, and council members Chiho Lai and Steve Kastner, took a position to oppose the legislation. East Bellevue Community Council requests that the Bellevue City Council not actively support Larry Springer's House Bill 1769. RCW 35.14 established community councils. It is the reason voters in East Bellevue finally agreed to annex to the city of Bellevue. RCW 35.14 already contains a sunset clause. Every 4 years, voters choose to continue the community councils. In November 2021, over 82% of the voters in East Bellevue voted for continuance of EBCC. For over 20 years, a statement of opposition has not been filed in the voters' pamphlet. Constituents in East Bellevue have chosen to have EBCC be their final vote on certain land use and zoning issues in their neighborhood. East Bellevue Community Council appreciates Bellevue City Council's continued support over the last several decades, and we respectfully ask the Bellevue City Council to not actively support Larry Springer's bill, HB 1769. Please reach out to us with any questions or comments you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hummer. The next speaker on the list is Christian Dorset. Though, Mr. Dorset, I do not see you connected by name. If you are connected under a different name, can you please use the raise hand function so I can locate you? Okay, I'm not seeing a hand, so I will go to our final pre-registered speaker, which is Kirsty English. Miss English, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And we understand that Miss English has a presentation she would like to go with her comments. I'll ask Ms. Dolquist to bring that up. Thank you. And Miss English, I'll be tracking your 3 minutes separately. I'll let you know when you get to 1 minute and when your time is up. You can begin now.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kirsty English. I'm a resident of Enitai. I have 3 children. I'm here on behalf of my neighbors because we had an unsafe and illegal tree removal attempt occur over the weekend. Next slide, please. Early in the morning on January 15th, an unlicensed crew arrived to remove a tree the size of a 4-story building on a steep hillside adjacent to homes, power lines, and a busy roadway. The city was closed, neighbors were not notified, and there was no road crew. You can see I've included a picture here. This tree is 36.5 inches in diameter, approximately 134 years old. My neighbors and I came in to stop the crew, to ask the crew what was happening, request paperwork. They were very gruff with us, angry. They did not end up cutting the tree, but this did cause me to look into this. Next slide, please. The original application is a subdivision permit. There's a home that's right next to this vacant lot. The subdivision permit says that the cedar is 18 inches in diameter. You can see this was filed in 2016. We measured it over the weekend. It's actually 36.5 inches in diameter. 5 years later, it doesn't grow, like trees just don't grow that fast. This is evidence of falsified records with the report. Next slide, please. The original subdivision application retained a 14-inch maple to meet Bellevue's 30% tree retention requirement. The maple was lost in a storm. Next slide, please. Land use documents from June obtained through a public records request show that the developer represented both trees as no longer present, and land use discovered that this misrepresentation was present through aerial photography. In October 2021, land use said that because the 14-inch maple was damaged by a storm, the adjacent evergreen should be retained. Okay, so you can see here that there's a pattern of deception in these documents.
1 minute remaining.
The evergreen is still present. He's saying it's gone, it's been cut. It has not actually been cut. Okay, so next slide, please. The developer was attempting to remove this tree before the city would notice in an unsafe and unprofessional manner, endangering the public and property. The city council should flag building permit number included here as inaccurate. Ensure that land use and city compliance follow up with the developer to, ensure the retention of the cedar, and investigate adding a tip line. It's only because me and 10 of my neighbors went around all weekend to stop these crews from this unsafe behavior, sent a letter in today to the city. And, I took time to present to this meeting that this tree isn't already down or property is not already damaged. There needs to be a better system in place for residents of Bellevue to report code violations and feel supported in that action. We're already enduring harassment from this neighbor. I'm putting my personal safety at risk to present to you today.
Ms. English, your time has expired.
Okay. Anyway, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. And at this point, that is the end of our pre-registered list. I'd ask if there are any other members who are connected to this call who would like to make comment. Please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with the phone. And I do see one additional hand. Ms. Garner, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Thank you to the Bellevue City Council for this opportunity to speak this evening. I'm Mindy Garner. I'm president of the Lake Hills Neighborhood Association. I'm here tonight to speak for both myself and the Neighborhood Association's board. It has come to our attention that there's a bill going before the legislature to end the community councils in Bellevue and Kirkland and to stop any future community councils that might come up during future annexations in Washington state. The East Bellevue Community Council came about as part of an agreement when Lake Hills agreed to be annexed in the 60s. It came with a sunset clause which allows the voters in the district to vote to continue it or to disband it every 4 years. Imagine our surprise when, after the neighborhood voted to keep it with 82% of the vote just last year, the legislature is trying to put it out of existence. Local involvement in government is one of the hallmarks of American society. This is one avenue for local involvement. The limited duties of the community council are important to the citizens of the district, and that's why it was voted in yet again last year. Based on that success, the Lake Hills Neighborhood Board voted unanimously to support the continuation of the East Bellevue Community Council. And I am here to ask you for the same support for the recent decision that your constituents made. Please communicate your support for the East Bellevue Community Council to our state legislators who will be voting on this issue soon. Please help us keep the East Bellevue Community Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Garner. And at this point, I do not see any additional hands raised, Mayor. That would close oral communications.
And the speaker who is not present, Mr. Randalls, is not online.
It was actually Mr. Dorset, and I still do not see him connected. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So council members on, we know you were in DC, but I think that you received an award on behalf of our city. I was wondering if you could give us a little synopsis of that.
Oh, certainly, Mayor. Just to clarify, it was actually related to some work that the staff is doing to leverage the fact that we won an award. So for context, I just want to thank Franz Lowenhurst, Daniel Lai, and Katie Halsey for organizing this. So knowing that we had recently won the National Roadway Safety Award for our Safer Streets and Vision Zero, they took advantage of the opportunity that the Transportation Research Board was back in DC last week and hosted a session specifically on Vision Zero and Technology Roundtable, where we had over 40 participants, including federal agencies as well as industry partners and businesses, to talk about our safe to systems approach. And I believe that this really positions us well as we look at the $1.2 trillion of the federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and position ourselves very well for the grants. And in fact, at the end of the session where we talked about and we brainstormed the 6 different areas where we can do more to create a safer network, we had different groups that looked at reactive decision-making, safety for seniors, project delivery delays, distracted driving, safe speeds, and vulnerable road users. At the end of that, we actually had our keynote, which was the National Safety Transportation Board Chair, Jennifer Homendy. She gave remarks at the beginning, along with me. And then at the end, she tweeted this message about the fact that she was thrilled to join and talk about the need to transition to a safe systems approach to address a growing public health crisis on our roads. The city of Bellevue is doing an outstanding job. And then they referenced our Vision Zero work and the strategic plan that we have and the action plan that we have in place. So it's a very exciting opportunity to highlight our work and position us very well for the funding. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for the report back. That's great. Mr. Miyake, I believe you have a report for us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. I have actually 2 items to report on under the city manager's report. One, which was in your packet this evening, and a second one that was not. But the one in your package is a good news story as it relates to an opportunity staff has undertaken based on feedback we received from the council in 2019 when we reviewed with you the city's Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. Joining us this evening are Blaine Ampson, our ADA Title IV Program Administrator out of the Human Resources Department, and Tom Purcell, Structural Operations Manager in Parks and Community Services Department, to share more with you about this, this great story. So I'll turn it over to you, Blaine.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Thanks so much for having us here tonight to talk about a project that is relatively small in scope, but massive in community inclusion and quality of life. Accessible changing tables at several park locations throughout the city will be a game changer for residents and visitors with access and functional needs who still want to enjoy Bellevue. While we will tell you tonight about some specific actions we're taking, the more important takeaway is how these actions will increase the independence and sense of belonging for some of our most underrepresented community members. Next slide, please. Thank you. This presentation is for information only tonight, with no action being requested from council, but we want to share this good work with you. Next slide, please. We'll take you through some of the background of how we got here, and then we'll share some specifics on the project scope, installation sites, and how all of this ties together with our council vision and priorities. Next slide, please. About 3 years ago, we were updating the city's Americans with Disabilities Act and Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan, which is a long title for a guiding document that sets our intentions and obligations related to meeting the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, and living up to our city's vision of welcoming the world and seeing diversity, including diverse abilities, as a key strength. During outreach with the community in that process, a lot of great ideas for strengthening our accessible community were offered, but didn't make it into the plan because we were first focused on meeting basic regulatory compliance standards as a baseline. The Inspiration Playground at Downtown Park was specifically designed several years ago to accommodate any needs that children, disabled or non-disabled, might have, so accessible changing tables were installed at the playground restroom. This feature surfaced multiple times as we asked the community for feedback for the self-evaluation and transition plan. They said that they recognized the value this feature could have if the city expanded locations for these accessible changing tables for both adults and children. They would be a key amenity for caregivers and residents with needs for accessible hygiene, allowing them to spend more time out and about in Bellevue, knowing that if there was a changing table nearby, facilities could support their needs. We were so fortunate to have enterprising members of our city's intergovernmental relations team see this value too, and join with our park staff to pursue funding to make this happen during the 2020 legislative session. And now I'd like to welcome my colleague, Tom Purcell from Parks, to talk about some of the details.
All right, thank you very much, Blaine. Next slide, please. Well, good evening, everybody. As a result of our staff's innovation and hard work, we were able to secure a grant for $97,000 from the Washington State Department of Commerce with the help of State Representative Mylan Tai. Ultimately, this effort was aimed at the purchase and installation of accessible changing tables at 8 park sites and facilities. In all, this grant will support the installation of 13 changing tables and the ongoing maintenance to ensure that they remain functional, safe, and usable for community members. As we project project timelines during this time of extended supply chain challenges for this body of work, we anticipate all the tables will be installed by early 2023, with the installation starting early sometime this year at some locations. Next slide, please. So the image you see here is of the restroom facility Inspiration Playground in Downtown Park that Blaine alluded to earlier. The initial site that offered accessible changing tables had ultimately inspired us to expand this program onto other sites. By the way, there's an anecdotal story that coincides with this image. A little while after opening the Inspiration Playground with the newly renovated restrooms,
I received several phone calls from people who had been out with their families for an afternoon or evening in Bellevue, and they were offering their heartfelt thanks. They indicated that having changing tables available at a public site offered them the opportunity to enjoy being out with their family and friends and not to have to return home prematurely to look after the special needs of someone in their group. That kind of support and gratitude, we as a group were sold on making this happen. The other sites included well-used parks and facilities and key locations throughout the city that will create a network of accessible and easy to get to locations that can be used for this purpose. Staff has worked hard to distribute these installations across the systems, but we had to live within some hard realities in choosing locations. The overriding reality being the overall internal size and maneuverability within the available space we were working with without impacting others needing ADA access, all the while taking into account the footprint of the changing table when deployed or in the down position. Additionally, consideration was given over to working on locations at proximity to parks and venues that had a traditional higher usage. And that wraps it up for me. And with that, Blaine, do you want to close this out?
I sure do. Next slide, please, Charmaine. Thanks so much, Tom. And as I said earlier, we're here tonight to deliver you the pertinent information on this grant and the actual actions that we're taking to make this network of changing tables a reality. But I hope if you take away one thing, it's that this effort will undoubtedly increase the faith and knowledge that residents have that the city of Bellevue lives its vision. This project embodies how we think about truly welcoming the world, embracing our diversity as a cultural characteristic and strength, and how we take action based on those principles. I believe that somewhere in Bellevue, there is a person with a disability who will discover these facilities this year or next and feel seen, valued, and part of the community. Thanks so much for the part that you took in setting this vision and making projects like this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Blaine and Tom. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members, I do have another report out tonight, and that is a briefing on the house that slid off its foundation up in the Somerset neighborhood. You know, by doubt, saw this on the media, received a lot of media attention. As you know, some residents in the Somerset neighborhood began yesterday with just such a terrifying experience. And I must say that our hearts go out to those who remain displaced today. I went to see the site myself and was personally moved by the scene and the amount of devastation that was took place there. The first call into 911 came at 10 minutes till 4 a.m. and the police were first to respond on the scene. As you know, they rescued a couple from their house that had slid and tilted from its foundation. Officers also rescued a dog. Given several factors surrounding the event, many service personnel and specialized disciplines were actually brought in to ensure the safety of the people living along the street. Joining the police officers were the emergency medical folks, as well as firefighters from the fire department, water utility experts, technicians from Puget Sound Energy, the city building official, as well as personnel from the State Department of Natural Resources. A number of homes were evacuated due to safety concerns, and the impacted residents were evacuated to the South Bellevue Community Center for shelter. We are really grateful for the partnership the city has with the Red Cross, who actually responded to the communities, who responded and staffed the community center and supported the evacuees all day. More importantly, though, no one was injured and no one was killed. So no lives were lost. So injuries were minimal. So during the day, staff helped retrieve belongings to residents. City staff and Red Cross assisted making sure all residents had a place to stay in the meantime. The response continues, and experts are assessing when it will be safe for neighbors to return to their homes once the road has been sufficiently cleared of debris, as well as evaluations take place. Determining the cause, which a lot of people are asking, it will take some time. Again, we are thankful that everyone is safe. More information will be shared with the city council as well as the city as new information becomes available. That ends my two reports this evening, Mayor.
Great, thank you so much. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up, we have a land use consideration. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce this?
Sure, it is a land use item with regard to the Glendale Country Club rezone. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kathy Gura and Liz Stead. Kathy, can you hear us?
Yes, my apologies. I could not get my camera to cooperate. So thank you, Mr. Miyake, and good evening, Mayor and council members. So the item before you tonight for consideration is the application to rezone a slightly over 3-acre portion of the Glendale Country Club from single family low density to multifamily medium density. So this is a process 3 quasi-judicial proceeding, which, as you know, means that the hearing examiner issues a recommendation after holding a hearing, and then the final decision is the council's to make. And in this case, the hearing examiner did recommend approval of the application, and no appeal was filed. So no final action is being asked by the council tonight. The purpose of being here tonight is to provide you with an overview of the project and allow you to ask any questions you may have based on the record that's in the hearing examiner's record. So your decision, as you know, is limited to evidence, relying on evidence that's in the hearing examiner's record. Here with me tonight to provide that overview is Liz Stead and Riley Pittman from the Development Services Department. And before I turn it over to them, however, I will, Mayor, because this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, suggest that you provide council members with the opportunity to disclose on the record any ex parte communications they may have had with the applicant or anyone else in support or opposition of the project. And the clerk's office has already, as they do, looked at the council emails. So there are no emails to disclose. So any disclosures would be outside of your council emails.
Okay, are there any ex parte communications that the council would like to disclose regarding the Glendale Country Club rezone? Not seeing any, we'll continue on.
Okay, I will turn it over to Ms. Stead and Mr. Pittman.
Thank you, City Attorney Garla and Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members. Thank you for having us here this evening. Mr. Pittman will be presenting the city staff report for the project. It is a rezone of a small portion of the Glendale Golf Country Club, and it is located at the intersection of 137th and Northeast 8th. So Mr. Pittman will go through this, and I will pass it over to him for a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm going to share my screen.
Amanda Watson, or what?
Sorry.
So maybe you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Riley Pittman. I am the planner who reviewed the Glendale rezone, and I'm here to just go give a brief presentation. As we said, this is a rezone of the northeast corner of the Glendale Country Club, which is located adjacent to Northeast 8th. The current property is zoned R1, and the proposal is to rezone that to be R10, which is consistent with a prior comprehensive plan amendment that was approved in 2020. And this is just a site-specific rezone, and there is no associated development proposal with this. As we already said, this is a process 3 quasi-judicial project or permit. That's where the Development Services Director issues a recommendation to the city's hearing examiner. City's hearing examiner held a public hearing in November of 2021 and then issued a recommendation of approval to the City Council on November 30th of 2021. And tonight, this has been, the recommendation from the hearing examiner is to the City Council for consideration. Just a little background, there was a comprehensive plan amendment associated with this that was reviewed through the Planning Commission and the City Council in 2020. And that culminated in a ordinance and resolution in 2020, as well as a SEPA determination of non-significance in October of 2020. So this again, this project or this rezone is actually in the location or in the jurisdiction of the East Bellevue Community Council, as you can see on this slide. It's in the western portion of their jurisdiction area. The site is also composed of 2 parcels, and so there was an associated boundary line adjustment which moved the western parcel to be in the northeast corner of this property in order to be rezoned. So the second parcel is what is being rezoned, with the bulk of the property remaining as it currently exists. Just an overview of the zoning surrounding the site. The current site of the Glendale Country Club is zoned R1, and that's single family residential. And as you can see, the majority of the surrounding area is also zoned single family residential with different densities of R2.5 and R3.5. Directly to the east of this, of the Glendale site along Northeast 8th, the properties are zoned multifamily, and that's at R30. And the request for this site is to be zoned R10, and that's 30 units per acre or 10 units per acre for the requested rezone. The current site is used as a golf course, so it's predominantly lawn and small shrubs and a lot of trees. Notably, the Kelsey Creek does flow along the western portion of the site. And then in vicinity of the proposed rezone in the northeast corner of the site, there are some wetlands and critical areas that would be accounted for as part of any future development of that parcel. The site is adjacent to Northeast 8th to the north and is accessed. The current golf course obtains primary access from Main Street, which ends on the eastern boundary of the site, kind of in the middle. You can see the large facility and parking lot there. As part of the review, the project was subject to public notice, and signage was posted on the site. Due to some noticing error, there was there were 2 courtesy hearings with the East Bellevue Community Council, one in May of 2021 and then one in September of 2021, just to make sure that the community surrounding it received adequate and public notice per our code. And minutes from both of those EBCC meetings are included in the file that was provided. No comments were submitted in regard to this except for those that were in support, and there are no parties of record. One comment was submitted during the hearing, lead up to the hearing, and that was concerning traffic and safety, and that was submitted to the hearing examiner for their consideration as part of the hearing process. The hearing examiner reviewed the development services project file and found that the project or the proposed rezone was consistent with the land use code and any codes that would be subject to it in the future, such as the critical areas ordinance or the transition overlay. The hearing examiner also found that as well as development services staff also found that the proposal was consistent with the decision criteria for a rezone, as well as consistent with the comprehensive plan requirements that would allow a rezone. The development services director and the hearing examiner both have recommended approval of the proposed rezone with minimal condition of approval. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Can you go back to the slide that has the criteria, the hearing examiner's decision criteria?
Okay.
So any comments or questions should be based on the criteria that we're going to see in just a second.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can. Trying to see everybody to figure out how to put this with that. Okay. Any comments or questions? Not seeing any. There's one council member I'm not seeing, but I think we're all good. Okay. So that was just for consideration. So we can move on to our study session items. Thank you very much for the presentation. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce? We have 3 study session items tonight, I believe.
Yes, we do, Mayor. Yes, we have 3 study session items, and the first one is an informational briefing from the Washington Department of Transportation on the I-405/State Route 167 corridor, including the I-405 Renton to Bellevue widening and express toll lanes project. Again, this is informational. This is an informational briefing. The council is not being asked for any direction, but rather tonight is an opportunity to provide comments as well as to ask questions. So joining us this evening is Lacey Jane Wolf, Assistant Director of Intergovernmental Relationships out of the City Manager's Office, Katie Simba Halsey, Policy Advisor in the Transportation Department. And then we have some additional guests, which I will allow Lacey Jane Wolf to introduce for this evening. Lacey Jane, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening. It's fun to be here tonight to be talking about one of Council's priority items, I-405 corridor. As you know, Bellevue is advocating during this current state legislative session for filling the gap on I-405. Mayor Robinson and Councilmember Robertson recently testified on this need last week. And I know that Councilmember Zahn has also been advocating to build stakeholder support for this important council priority. So it would be easy to forget while we're doing all of that work on filling the funding gap about the project that's happening right now all around us. And that's what we've brought WashDOT here to talk to us about, the I-405 Renton to Bellevue widening and express toll lanes project. As you know, this is going to benefit not only people who drive on 405, but also people who take transit, who use the East Trail, one of the regional trails, to bike and walk with their families. So a very exciting project that I know is a favorite of ours. Before I introduce our guests from WashDOT, I'd like to take a minute to introduce Bellevue's Transportation Policy Advisor, Katie Kasimba Halsey, who joined the city in July. Katie has brought a wealth of knowledge and expertise to our city and put it to work immediately, providing many critical, helping us support many critical projects and critical priorities, including our collaborations with WashDOT. So I'd like to ask Katie to say hello.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. And thank you for the warm introduction, Lacey Jane. I've spent years working with the city while at Sound Transit, the Sound Cities Association, and most recently with WashDOT on the I-405 program, who are with us today. But I'm absolutely delighted to be working at the city now as your transportation policy advisor. I'll make this short because I know that this is a very important topic that Rob is going to be presenting in just a moment. So I'll hand it back over to Lacey Jane, but I'm really looking forward to working much more with each of you in the future.
Thanks, Katie. And that's a great transition to introduce our guest speakers tonight. We have 3 representatives from WashDOT's I-405 SR 167 program, including Deputy Program Administrator Rob Wick, Engineering Manager Gil McNabb, and Public Information Craig Smiley. We also have joining us tonight Ken Horton, construction manager from Flatiron Lane Joint Venture, which I believe is the contractor for this project. So you have a wealth of technical experts here tonight. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Rob.
Great, thank you, Lacey Jane. So Craig, are you going to run the slideshow? I know most of our focus here tonight is going to be on the Renton to Bellevue project, but in the introduction here, I do want to just touch on some of the broader North End challenges and potential solutions going on. And hopefully we'll get the slideshow running. I saw it worked earlier, so I know it can happen.
Try it again.
There we go. Progress. And can you put that in slideshow mode, Craig? Perfect. Thank you. All right, so again, I just have a brief introduction overall this evening, and then some of my representatives for the program are going to take it from there. I look forward to the updates on Renton to Bellevue, and I know you do as well. But just a reminder that our program, the Renton to Bellevue, or rather the I-405-167 mega program, represents a 50-mile corridor, including all of 405 and a significant portion of 167. We are working off of a master plan vision that's approximately 20 years old. I think everybody on this is probably pretty familiar with the master plan vision, but it's effectively a express toll lane and bus rapid transit system that will provide significant benefits to the overall functionality of our corridor throughout the entire, you can see the map there, the entire stretch of that map, as well as connections to other corridors. I did want to touch on, before we get into the Renton to Bellevue project, the impacts of COVID on our express toll lane and toll revenue. So I know we've briefed the council before, and it's not going to be a huge surprise that with COVID, there's been significantly less use of the toll lanes. With our upcoming projects that rely on, at least partially on bonded toll revenue, there's a pretty significant gap associated with that. Depending on the scenario that you look at, it's anywhere from approximately $175 million gap up to in excess of $450 million. We were tasked with a couple of provisos coming out of the last legislative session in 2021. One of those provisos focused us largely on trying to minimize the gap or reduce it altogether, and to come up with delivery scenarios that could provide paths forward to not only find ways of closing that gap, but also of funding whatever the remaining gap is, and try and provide all of the projects that have come out in previous legislative bills. I know a lot of the folks in the Bellevue area are largely concerned about not only Renton to Bellevue, but the associated 522 to 527 and North End projects. And those North End projects that are currently in design were the ones that were most impacted by the shortcoming in toll revenue. And I did want to just give a brief update. And again, I don't think this is likely to come as a surprise to anybody, but the governor's proposed budget leading into this 2022 leg session did find a way of closing that gap. And as I mentioned before, there's a range. Essentially what the governor's proposed budget allows for is the closing of the $450 million gap, which brings forward the 522 to 527 and BRT in line with the Sound Transit delivery, and also moves forward 167 Express Ox Lane project and toll upgrade project, which function actually in along with the Renton to Bellevue project that we're going to be talking about tonight. So we'll see what happens during the legislative session. All bets are off during the leg session, so hopefully things will go well. Obviously, we are positioned to deal with whatever we get out of the legislative session, and we'll act on that. But we do have a very significant active construction project in Renton to Bellevue that has direct impacts on your city. And so we're going to give you some updates on that tonight. And just briefly touching on the agenda. So we've hit welcome and introductions. We're going to get a project overview and then progress on some of the early milestones in the Renton to Bellevue project. I know the significant concern to the city is the upcoming Main Street Bridge replacement and potential closures on Main Street Bridge and timing on that. And then we'll hit potential demo viewing opportunities and also answer questions. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gil. Gil, do we have you?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rob. So just to give a brief project overview. So what we're looking at here is approximately 12-mile corridor of I-405 from Bellevue down to Renton. And the objective of this project is pretty simple. We're widening 405, a lot of complexities in implementing, but the objective is pretty straightforward. So we are widening 405 by one lane in each direction, both the north and southbound direction. And to create the express toll lanes. And so these will connect up to the Northeast 6 in Bellevue, where the express toll lanes currently terminate at the south end, and continue that same operation down to SR 167 down in Renton. So this will match up down in Renton with the recently completed direct connector project. That's the flyover ramp that we call it, from 405 to 167. So when this job's done, it will connect up directly to that and offer continuous express toll lane from 405 to 167. So it's a pretty significant segment. You know, this once we complete this, it's a really significant milestone, and the whole, 40 plus miles of managed lanes between I-5 at the north end, where 405 I-5 junction, and to the south for all of 405 and 167 down to Puyallup. There's a lot of other kind of things that are tied into this project besides the dual express toll lanes. We have partnerships with City of Renton and Sound Transit in King County. So just to point out a couple of highlights, we'll have direct access ramps for bus rapid transit at both the 112th interchange, just to the south of Bellevue, and also the 44th Street interchange. And it will allow for, bus rapid transit, bus stations. Also, in partnership with King County, we've constructed a portion of the East Rail Trail system to the west, just between I-405 and Lake Washington. And also in the green segments that you can see there, that is some added general traffic capacity southbound 405, where we currently have some choke points between I-90 and 112th, and then also between Northeast 44th and Northeast 30th Street to the south, where there's, that's on a hill, and so oftentimes you have truck slowdowns there. And so the additional general purpose capacity will help alleviate that. We do have, we're well aware of the Mountains of Sound Greenway that, they currently, there's the project for that through the Factoria area that I think is about finished up. But we have work in that area too, around the I-90 interchange. So lots of coordination, lots of different entities. Go ahead, Craig, next slide. So this is kind of near and dear to the project team. This is a big project, and this is quite a small piece of it, but it's significant in that this is kind of the first milestone, if you will, for the project. And that is being able to open up the south 2.5 miles of East Rail Trail. And so you may recognize some of your colleagues here in the photo. King County had an opening on November 10th with participation by City of Bellevue and Renton also participating. Next slide. And this is just some, we have an actual construction operation here that shows work progressing on the East Rail Pedestrian Bridge over 405. This is near Mercer Slough. So this is one of the bridge abutments or foundations that's going in here. And you can see the rendering at the top there. So definitely have a lot of construction underway. And here's a couple other examples of some of the construction that's taking place. And I will point out in the top right corner here, 44th interchange, this is a rendering of approximately how this will appear when it's all constructed. A lot of work here. This is kind of one of the interchanges, primary interchanges, kind of driving the schedule on the entire project. This is essentially in the middle of the job, and the project is sort of driven by the progress on this piece of work because it has a long timeline, which we're well underway on. Next slide. And that brings us to the Main Street Bridge replacement in Bellevue. So this is another kind of very significant, critical piece of work that's coming up very soon, is the planned closure of Main Street. And this is essentially, we need to demolish the bridge, the existing bridge, and replace it essentially in order to accommodate the widening in the support structure for Main Street, but primarily to accommodate the widening 405 through a very urban area. Currently, work is anticipated to begin in March of early March, and we're looking at other potential weekends as contingencies. Work is to be completed in August. That's if we get started on time. And the whole thing will kick off with a full weekend closure to bring down the existing bridge, remove it. And then that would be followed by a 150-day calendar day closure of Main Street in order to rebuild the structure there and get it open to a single lane in each direction capacity for an additional 60 days. Go ahead, Craig.
Be on the next slide. There you go. Is that
All
not
right.
showing?
Yeah. There we go. Thank you. So during the weekend closure, what this shows in the red hatchers, that's essentially the closure limits from Southeast 8th Street in Bellevue to the south and Northeast 4th to the north. In the orange, of course, that's Main Street. So that's where the bulk of the work will take place. Because the weekend closure has such a large impact to the entire region, really, when we close down 405, there's a lot of other work activities that will be coordinated along with this particular closure. You can kind of see the sign detours, what those will be, utilizing 4th and 116th. Given that there's a number of roadway crossings and interchanges here, I think, certainly the local folks and the commuters will find their way. There's plenty of alternates, but, there will be sign detour in place. And of course, for this too, we'll have the major detours, around 405 to the interstate routes, such as, utilizing I-5, I-90 and SR 520. To get around this closure. Do want to just go ahead, Craig. Next slide, please.
Go back one. There we go.
Oh, one back. Yeah. So after the initial weekend of Main Street removal and disposal, we'll have that 150 calendar day for the work to reconstruct Main Street. And so what this is showing is essentially the local long-term detour. So the signed detour again will be across Northeast 4th, which is in the most immediate vicinity, utilizing 110th and 112th Avenues and 116th Avenues. It kind of shows some other potential roadway opens in the little green segments there at Northeast 8th and also down at Southeast 8th and certainly even some points further north, to get to navigate through Bellevue during this closure impact. I just do want to also acknowledge with this that the schedule for this is intended to avoid the holiday period between November 15th to January 2nd. So that is a contract requirement. And also that the single phase, 150 days, essentially to get the bridge back operational, is a little different than the original concept in our contract. In that, we had it's essentially a full closure for a much shorter impact, kind of a rip off the Band-Aid approach, if you will, to where per our concept, it would have been 600 calendar days of continuous, one-way traffic in each direction, or one lane, I should say, of traffic in each direction versus 2 lanes. So shorter duration, but full closure in this case. And that was conceived by our contractor. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce the next speaker. I believe if Ken Horton's here, he'll be talking about the weekend schedule.
Hey, thanks, Gil. Yeah, I was prepared to also just run through a brief schedule for the next 5 to 7 months of the whole Main Street closure. So as you said earlier, we had this idea of instead of a long-term impact, a shorter-term impact. And so we're glad everybody's on board with this. So as this weekend closure approaches on the 1st of March, is about the time frame that we want to close Main Street. And just note that the new bridge is a little bit longer than the existing bridge because of the widening effort. So on the east side of the bridge, the new abutment is in a different footprint. So once we would close Main Street, we'd be able to start some of the work on the east abutment, leading into our weekend closure, in which we would demolish the bridge. And so since we have this lead time on the east side, our intent is to start on the east side, taking the bridge down, working our way across to the west. All the material, when it comes down, will go off-site at various intervals. We don't have a set schedule for demolition debris removal. It's just going to be an ongoing, constant activity through the weekend closure. And so by the end of the weekend, the bridge will be gone. We'll have a new traffic configuration on I-405 that will allow us to build a new pier in the center between the southbound and northbound and start on the abutments on both the east and west side of the bridge. So moving forward, our schedule will focus on the pier in the middle. There's the most amount of work in the middle. It obviously supports both spans. So our focus is pier, and then we work on both abutments while pier work is going on. We get a couple months down the road, we get in the May timeframe, end of May, where we actually have girders getting ready to be set. So we bring girders, we set on girders on both northbound and southbound spans and start the bridge deck work. As Gil said earlier, at about a 5-month period is our first deadline is to open traffic one way in each direction. So we intend to build the bridge to a point where we can put a lane of traffic in the center of the bridge, both going east and west. And that'll give us the last 2 months, the last 60 days before our deadline of finishing the outsides of the bridge, the barriers, the handrails, the sidewalks, and that kind of stuff. But in general, that's our approach to the Main Street Bridge.
I'm up and I'll be talking about our outreach and coordination for this work. First, I'd like to really give a big thanks to the city staff. They've been participating in our weekly task force information meetings and keeping us in the loop on what's going on in Bellevue really from the beginning of the project. We began meeting regularly for planning and coordination of this specific work back in early December of 2021, and really appreciate the feedback and review that they've been providing us with our communications plans, our outreach materials and really helping us focus our local community efforts. So this briefing tonight is really kind of the kickoff to our public-facing outreach and coordination for this work. So during our planning event efforts with the city staff, we kind of took an inventory of both city and WSDOT resources to help kind of get the message out to the public. And we decided on a combination of outreach methods and avenues. At WSDOT, our philosophy is really to lead with the web. That means, updates to our project websites, posts to the WSDOT blog, utilizing our social media presence on Twitter and Facebook. We also use City of Bellevue's web resources like the It's Your City publication and the City's Next Door account. So we're really going to be utilizing kind of a combination of digital media and traditional media as well as traditional community outreach methods such as postcard mailings and doing business outreach. So our goal is really to get the word out to the community about the work that's going to be affecting them right next to downtown Bellevue and Main Street. It's also let the drivers know about the impacts of the full weekend closure to try and reduce trips and help them plan ahead, encourage them to delay their trips to the off-peak hours and to help find alternate routes for them. Generally, big full weekend closure like this, we see about a 20% reduction in trips just based off of the outreach efforts. And that's really kind of the metric that we're shooting for to get the word out on this. So another thing I'll mention briefly is we're looking at doing a potential demolition viewing opportunity. So if that's something that council members would be interested, get a hold of Lacey Jane or Katie, and we'll be happy to try and coordinate that for you. And I guess we can take some questions from there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. If you get rid of your slide, I can see better. There we go. Oh, thank you. Okay, any comments or questions from the council on this? See Council Member Barksdale. Start with you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just have one question in terms of bike ped experience. Just given its detours and people just being confused about the change and sort of where they need to go, are there strategies or approaches that were taken to mitigate impacts to bikers and pedestrians?
Excuse me. We'll be reaching out to Cascade Bike Club as one of our strategies for bikers. Pedestrians is really kind of what we focused on as far as WSDOT's website, City of Bellevue's resources, and our blog. That's really kind of pedestrians. Also, we'll have signed detours that will be placed out there ahead of the work.
Just thinking about maybe like, I know we've done sort of the delayed pedestrian signal, and they're dedicated bike signals that give them, some time to be more visible or dedicated time to go. I don't know if that's something that we might consider.
There might be some signal work out there. I'm not sure if it will be ahead of that work or not. I know that's something that we've kind of discussed with Steve Costa. It's something we'll definitely look into.
Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson, followed by Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to express my appreciation for WSDOT and the 405 team. We've had a really long-standing, great partnership. I've seen different faces come and go from the 405 team, but to a person, every single person's been great to work with. And I just really wanted to share my appreciation for that. And let's hope that the governor's budget goes through so that we can keep doing great work to make 405 a better corridor for everyone. My question is, when we're building the new Main Street Bridge, are we going to have any, other than the full weekend closure, are we going to have any lane closures on 405 North or South? And if so, how will those be scheduled?
Probably let Ken answer that question. He's probably the most familiar with the phasing of the construction.
Yeah, sure. There's definitely going to be other lane closures. We would embrace the notification periods that the city's asking for us for these upcoming closures. But in general, for the girder setting operation for the deck, there'll be full nighttime closures, not a whole weekend closure. probably 3 on each direction of 405. Shouldn't affect, it'll be the same detour route, but it'll be late at night. There's like 6 and 7, I think there are like 6-hour windows for each of those things. And then we have periodic lane closures where we can take lanes throughout the construction on the highway, but those are also nighttime operations. So during the day, it's full 405 traffic with their full lane availability. And then we have these other things at night.
Great. That's really helpful. I'm glad that not only are we avoiding the AM and PM peaks, we're avoiding all during the day. I assume there'll be signage in whatever direction has lanes closed or full closure north of 520 for southbound and south of I-90 for northbound, so that people, if they're running the corridor beyond Bellevue, that they can take an option and take a bridge and go I-5. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be working with WashDOT's Traffic Management Center, and we'll have kind of, you often see on the signs that are out there, the changeable messaging signs that are out there for our closure, that information will be displayed ahead of it.
Super. I know it'll be a little bit painful, but as they say, no pain, no gain. I'm really excited to see this project happen and have Main Street be a much better bridge. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor, followed by Councilmember Lee and Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you, Mayor. And I too want to thank the WashDOT team for coming here today and giving us an update on this. A couple of quick questions on the Main Street Bridge there. First of all, I'm really glad that they were able to cut down the time that this will be closed to going from 600 to 150 days. That's fantastic. So that is unbelievable. And I'm sure a lot of people will be very appreciative of that, because it will be a little painful at first. And I'm just wondering, have we done any analysis on the amount of throughput on Main Street Bridge, or how many cars actually go, or pedestrians or bikes go over that per day, per month, et cetera? Just trying to get a sense of the impact and inconvenience to residents trying to get to downtown, or vice versa, trying to get to the other side of the city. Do we have those numbers? And where I'm going with that, which I'll get to my second question, is just on the outreach. I just feel like we need to start that a little bit earlier. We're already mid-March. This is gonna, mid-January. This is going to start in March. I feel like we need to start really, and I know you've done some of this already, but just being a little bit more aggressive so that major employers can start working on a plan already to how they're going to address this. Now, one of the few good things about the pandemic is that not everyone's back to work yet, so that will certainly help, or they're only going back to work on certain days. So that's great. But I'd love to see, in addition to taking advantage of all of our usual traditional digital communication channels that you mentioned, Craig, there, but perhaps we can do some actual individual reaching out to, to Amazon, PACCAR, whoever else we need to connect with, and then also take advantage of some of our partners like the BDA and the Bellevue Chamber. I think it'd be great if we can get connected with them, and they can send out through their channels as well about this closure and the amount of time that it will be closed, and the detour routes that they are aware of before they get there and surprised during their morning commute. Hopefully they won't be surprised with that portable messaging out there for a week or two, but maybe they're on vacation, they didn't know, and all of a sudden, how am I going to get into work? So I'll stop there and let you answer those questions. But again, thank you for being here today, and thanks for the update.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple parts to that. As far as impact for traffic analysis, we did do a traffic analysis. I do not have the numbers with me offhand, but that's definitely something we can follow up with. But we did do traffic analysis for impacts of the detour and the full closure weekend and the long-term closure. So we'll definitely follow up with that information. We do have some other briefings scheduled. BDA is definitely one of them. We just briefed the chamber, I think, a week ago, but we wanted to let you folks know first before we let the cat out of the bag. But we do have a very aggressive outreach schedule planned, basically starting tomorrow. So we do have some, I believe, door to door. We've already making some phone calls, getting some contacts, working with city staff to really get a big hold of our resources to get a hold of businesses and things like that for the impacts. And again, the mailings, we're really trying to think outside of the box for a lot of these things. Number one, due to the pandemic, it's a little bit harder to do some briefings in person that we normally would do, but just trying to be creative with our resources that we do have available.
Great, thank you. And put me down for the demolition viewing.
You got it.
All right, Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Lee, we can't hear you yet. Councilmember Lee, can I hear you now?
No, Mayor, I think he's having an audio issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll have Councilmember Stokes start, and then we'll come back to you while you work on your audio. So go ahead. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I apologize.
That's right.
I appreciate working with WashDOT. You know, Bellevue has a great long-term experience with WashDOT, and the 405, I remember 20 years ago, or maybe how we built this Texas T project. You know, that's the biggest project Bellevue has in working in transportation freeway. You know, over $100 some million, and it's a pretty big project. And the city and the WashDOT has worked very well to minimize the interruption. Obviously, for a project like that, you know, create a lot of traffic, 405 congestion and all that stuff. And so, you know, the people have changed. You know, our longtime employees have since, most of them have left. And I assume WashDOT similarly is the case. But I think the relationship has continued. There are many things they did collaboratively. I think that's what I want to point out. I think Jennifer Robertson already kind of mentioned that. And you work with the engineers on both sides and people, personnel, information folks. We were utilizing signs, signboards, electronic signs, all kinds of stuff, and manual signs, whatever that we believe that it will interrupt people's, you know, traffic flow and pattern. And, you know, you just suggested the chamber and all that business people that flow. Right now, we're going to look at 20, 30,000 more people working. Well, I don't know what the sequence would be, whether that would be impact that would be felt, but regardless, you're going to see many thousands of people coming in, working downtown, in and out. You know, downtown mobility is always a consideration, big challenge. How do you move people in? Even with COVID-19, you know, people are coming back. So I'm not sure, you know. But looking at the map, is there any traffic going to be interrupted on the freeway itself, 405, or just the bridge, or what?
For that full weekend closure, yes, there'll be.
It will be
starting Friday night till Monday morning. It'll be a full.
So just one weekend. That should be very short duration.
Correct, and then after that, going forth, if we need to interrupt traffic, it'll be at night. So during very low traffic operations.
But regardless, just keep that in mind. You know, you never know what the situation might lead you to. But I think it's better to be prepared and then trying to figure out when it happens, right, and scramble. So I would appreciate you voiced on that, you know, working with the city and WashDOT staff, figuring out what potential congestion might be, or delay might be, or interruption might be, and have signs, adequate signs, and all communication tools to be ready to be deployed. I think we would definitely remember those things, and we will, you know, want to maintain those kind of seamless relationship. So thank you. Looking forward to a seamless construction job. Thanks.
Thank you. And I would like to say that we are operating as a team with both city staff and the contractor. So if there is something that needs to change in the middle of the process, you know, we're happy to hear suggestions and do our best to optimize.
If I recall, actually, the project came under budget, and actually the contractor got paid bonus for the under budget. So hopefully this would come in the same way because of good planning. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments so far and the presentation. It's very thorough. I happen to live very close to where this is going to take place, up on Woodridge, and you know, come up on either the connector or Southeast 6th or 8th, or all up to 4th, and it's the more I think about it, there's a wide area that's actually going to be pretty well affected, and this is one of the most congested areas in Bellevue in the morning and particularly in the evening. So I'm assuming that your outreach is going to go beyond what you're kind of been talking about. It's not just around the 4th Street, Main Street Bridge, but it's going to have an impacts all the way across to the connector up to 116th and around that. So, cutting up through Woodridge is, as we found several, years ago now with the impacts of more people coming in, that people find ways to go. It's going to be really tough. So I appreciate the outreach, and I think the more the better, and particularly even going down Richards Road and letting people know what they're going to face when they come through, particularly in the early stages of this, because people are going to come in there and all of a sudden, bam, there are all these cars all stopped and everything else. So it's a big job, but I do appreciate your the planning on this, and it's exciting to move this forward, and hope you can really stick to the plan. Things always change, but it's pretty exciting. And I think the community, just getting out and letting people around in the community know, because we go back and forth, and that's a very complex roadway system through that area. And so it's going to be a lot of congestion and all that. So, that, but I just want to emphasize that the more information, the better. And working with the different neighborhood groups and getting stuff out to everybody is going to be very, very critical. And anything else we can do to help, let us know. So thanks very much, and looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn, I didn't see your hand up, but I assume you want to comment on this.
Yeah, I would. So I appreciate the presentation and, finding ways to limit the impact as much as possible. So I think that this is a very good plan. And the comment about making sure that we continue to have funding so we can actually finish the whole project is important. But if nothing else, we can get this part of Renton to Bellevue complete. I also appreciate the comprehensive outreach. I echo my colleagues about this part of 405. It's not just people coming in and out of Bellevue. It's also ones going from Renton all the way up to Bothell, Woodinville. So making sure that communication works well. So to that end, I'm wondering about, for these kind of closures, is there communication with Google Maps so that the maps themselves are adjusted for the fact that this closure exists? And then I'm thinking, to Councilmember Stokes' point, those side streets that we're now going to be using for traffic, I am assuming that you're going to work closely with our transportation department so that with our adaptive signals that they can be adjusted to make sure that from a queuing standpoint, we don't end up with too much backlog in any one of those streets, to make sure that traffic is able to keep going. And then the importance of staying on schedule. So I think you understand the importance of that. I guess my question related to that is that we are now in day, I can't remember, 40 something of the concrete strike that has impacted a number of different projects. I'd like to understand whether for this work, where granted we're starting demo in March, but there may be a backlog of demand for concrete and delivery. So just wanted to understand whether that's been factored into your mitigation plan and planning. So those were my questions. Thanks.
I think there was a couple of things there as far as traffic optimization. Yes, we're definitely working with the city's traffic folks to kind of optimize light timing and things like that. We're also providing a little bit of extra capacity by repurposing the HOV lane there, I believe on Northeast 4th Street, 8th Street. Don't quote me, I'll have to look that one up. But I know we're definitely working with the city's traffic operations folks to monitor it over time too, as we have the full closure on Main Street there. As far as our contingencies, I mean, Gil mentioned we have a lot of components that are happening ahead of this. We need to do some restriping, that's weather dependent. There are some external challenges with the trades, with strikes that happen. As far as what getting materials and things like that, hopefully Ken Horton can speak a little bit more to the process of ordering girders and things like that. But generally, big components like that have a really long lead time that we've been working to procure ahead of anything like this. So hopefully we can get through the concrete strike without too much delay.
I can speak to the girders, Craig, because the girders are approved and ordered and under fabrication by a contract or a sub vendor down in Tacoma. Concrete Technologies are a pretty reputable firm. They do their own concrete work, so that's progressing. The cast in place concrete on the project, however, is subject to this strike, and we don't place any concrete for another 8 to 9 weeks on the project till we do our first foundation footing. So we're hopeful that the strike's resolved within 8 weeks, but there will be some pressure on the industry because everybody who's been suffering now is going to need concrete. But we think we have some good relationships with our vendors, and they understand the priorities that we have and the importance of the Bellevue Main Street Bridge project. So we're going to leverage those to get some better service than maybe some other contractors do. But in all honesty, we just need the strike to be resolved as soon as possible, and then the service will work itself out throughout the industry.
And then your other comment about Google Maps, Councilmember Zahn. We do work with Google Maps. Our system, we plug in our closures and it actually goes, Google Maps kind of recognizes it and it basically duplicates what we install into our system. So if you go to the WashDOT website, it will show the construction closures and they're basically mirrored on Google Maps.
Great. Thank you so much.
So I'll just close with, I'm really impressed with the schedule of the Main Street work that you're going to do. And if you can actually pull that off, that's going to be super impressive and very little impact to the city, which we appreciate. I wanted to ask you about the ped bike path going over I-405, because there had been a lid over there that reduced the noise to Woodridge, and now we're going to be replacing it, which is good. And I wonder what the schedule of that will be like. When will that be completed, and what the noise impact might be for the surrounding neighborhoods, and then what the experience will be for the people using that path.
I believe you're talking about the pedestrian bridge for the East Rail. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, over southbound. Ken, I don't suppose you know what the schedule is for construction of that. I know we have had some work on there that's being affected by the concrete pour right now.
I can speak a little bit to it. We started on the east abutment and that is all poured in place. We just recently started work on the west abutment. There are a lot of excavation and work on the west side. We have the girders cast, so it's just a scheduling. Once the concrete strike's over, we can actually pour our abutments. Then we'll actually have a set schedule for girders, but it's definitely in our works for this year. In 3-month time frame is what we're looking for, as long as the strike doesn't affect us any further than it already has. But that's about as much information I have on hand.
Okay, that's great. Can you describe what the experience will be for how wide is this going to be for the users of it?
It's approximately a 24-foot wide bridge over the highway. It's 4 girders, approximately 6 foot on center. It's a pretty long bridge, 160 foot long. So it's one continuous span over the highway. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. And thank you. And then I just want to reiterate what Councilmember Barksdale said. As somebody who rides a bike, I know when we have these construction projects, it seems that the workers always inadvertently put their signs in the bike lanes or on the sidewalks. And so I just want to make sure that we're creating a safe environment for people who are having to detour or go through some of these construction areas. So looking forward to seeing you pull this off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 7:34. We will come back at 7:45. Take a quick break. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce our next study session items?
Yes, Mayor. The next two study session topics are related to public safety. The first topic is an informational update on the police department's ongoing progress to review the department's use of force policies identified in the OIR report. And then the second topic that we'll roll right into after the OIR update is with regard to the proposed use of body-worn cameras. And, as council's aware, quite a bit of work has been undertaken on the body-worn cameras over the past 2 years. But tonight, staff is seeking direction per state law, which highly recommends that the council adopt a proposed resolution to authorize the use of body-worn cameras by the Bellevue Police Department, as well as identify additional community involvement measures. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Shirley. He is joined by Major Andrew Popachok, Sergeant Joe Ingman, as well as Megan Black. Kathy Gerla will join that group of folks once we get to the second topic, which is the resolution on body-worn cameras. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chief Shirley.
Thank you, Brad. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and City Council members. I'm pleased to be here to provide you with a progress report regarding the Bellevue Police Department's responsiveness to the recommendations identified in the Office of Independent Review's report concerning the Bellevue Police Department's use of force policies. These recommendations have assisted our department with strengthening and updating our use of force policies to ensure we are adhering to current best practices. The purpose of this presentation is to update you on the progress on the recommendations since the last update that was provided last quarter on September 20th, 2021. To quickly review, on June 11, 2020, Mayor Robinson, with the support of this council, pledged to review the use of force policies of the Bellevue Police Department in order to identify any potential reforms. The OIR group actively sought out and encouraged community engagement and input, receiving over 1,000 responses from community members. After incorporating the overall feedback, they issued the final report in April of 2021. I will now discuss the Bellevue Police Department's responsiveness to the OIR report covering the fourth quarter of 2021. During the last quarter of 2021, the Bellevue Police Department has responded to an additional 12 recommendations. As a result, to date, we have responded to a total of 32 of the 47 recommendations. The majority of the 12 recommendations were focused on the updates related to the use of less lethal force, primarily tasers and impact projectiles. Here's a list of the changes. Many of these recommendations have been common practice for the Bellevue Police Department, and we took this opportunity to write them into our policy. I'd like to highlight a few of them. Recommendations 22 through 25. These recommendations are related to the use of tasers. We have updated our taser policy concerning these recommendations by restricting simultaneous deployments of multiple tasers, limiting the length of taser applications to 5 seconds except in exigent circumstances, requiring officers to reassess the threat before redeploying a taser and limiting the number. And lastly, requiring medical response after a taser application. Recommendation 28 stated the Bellevue Police Department should modify its policy to clarify the type of threat that justifies using impact projectiles and make clear they should not use them against passive resistive subjects. The department policy for this has been updated as recommended. Recommendation 30. This recommendation, we updated the policy to provide a warning and a reasonable opportunity to comply before using any impact projectiles. We have now added this to our policy as well. Recommendation 34. This suggested that we publish all tactical munitions authorized for the use by our civil disturbance and SWAT teams on our public website. After careful consideration and consultation with department subject matter experts, I've concluded that this action would not be in the best interest of public safety and could compromise our opportunity to safely and effectively protect this community. We will therefore not be publishing our tactical munitions on the city website. Lastly, I'd like to address OIR recommendation 37 regarding the implementation of body-worn cameras. The Bellevue Police and the city have been researching body-worn cameras for a couple of years now. What the OIR report confirmed is that there is a unanimous agreement that our officers should be equipped with body-worn cameras. We have enthusiastically embraced this recommendation and currently have a body-worn camera steering committee made up of various stakeholders from across the city that continue to work toward evaluating this recommendation. An additional key benefit of having a body-worn camera program is that it will greatly assist in fulfilling the new 2022 state law that requires all custodial interrogations of juveniles and felony suspects to be electronically audio and video recorded. Our goal is to have a body-worn camera program up and running by the end of 2022. As I mentioned earlier, we have continued to make progress in responding to the OIR group's recommendations. As you can see from this slide, we have responded to 32 of the 47 recommendations, or roughly 68%, in the last 9 months since the final report was published in April of 2021. We look forward to addressing the remaining recommendations. The Bellevue Police Department is committed to not only keeping our community informed about the use of force reforms, but also to actively solicit input and feedback. Our PIO, Megan Black, is joining us now to give a brief overview of these efforts. Megan. You're muted, Megan.
Sorry about that. I swore I wasn't going to do that. We have been very active on the community engagement front. In fact, just about a year ago, we heard very loud and clear from our community that they wanted more information and transparency from the police department about what we do and how we do it. Now, in response to that, we immediately published a data dashboard on the police department website. Here you'll find links to crime data, citation complaints, the use of force, and we are currently converting this dashboard to a more automated process that will provide even greater detail, transparency, and interaction for our community. We've also created an Engaging Bellevue webpage to inform the community about the use of force policy reforms that you heard about tonight and the body-worn camera program. This site helps us be more transparent and engage with the community through education and feedback. Now, included with the Engaging Bellevue site, Chief Shirley created a video message on the projects that we're talking about, and we've been able to use this video to help with engagement and in communications. Well, we've had many discussions with our Police Advisory Council over the past year or so, and other stakeholder groups as well, providing a progress report on the reforms, and we are gathering their feedback. You can find that progress report on the Engaging Bellevue site and also our police website. And last week, we held a community meeting to update the public on the use of force policy reforms, including the body-worn cameras. This meeting was well attended and the engagement was quite robust. Our team was able to answer dozens of questions and clear up any confusion about the process. This January 12th meeting was the initial community rollout of the body-worn camera program. And moving forward, we are committed to ongoing community outreach and engagement. Now that's going to include news releases, social media posts, Engaging Bellevue, It's Your City and neighborhood news publications. And we also will be holding future public meetings with the public and stakeholder groups like our advisory councils. Again, our commitment is to engage, to gather feedback, to inform, and to educate. Now, the initial feedback is overwhelmingly supportive for a body-worn camera program. We conducted a quick poll during the virtual meeting to gauge the support. Now, the poll showed 94% support body-worn cameras. And while it's certainly not a scientific poll, it does piggyback well of what the OIR group learned, and that is that the community support for body-worn cameras is incredibly strong. So there you have it, Chief Shirley. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Megan. In addition to the update on the OIR recommendations, there's a proposed resolution with respect to the body-worn cameras that our city attorney, Kathy Gerla, is now going to discuss. Kathy.
Thank you, Chief Shirley. Good evening again, Council. As the Chief mentioned, we're here tonight to talk not only about the OIR update, but also a proposed resolution. So we are seeking direction from the Council on a resolution that would do two things. One, it would authorize the police department to use body-worn cameras consistent with some further decisions and actions that the Council will need to make. And secondly, it will identify additional opportunities for community involvement beyond all of those you've already heard about from the police department staff tonight, to give the community an opportunity for even further involvement in the development of the operational policies that will be needed to implement body-worn cameras. As has been mentioned, there is a state law that strongly encourages cities to adopt ordinances or resolutions authorizing the use of body-worn cameras before law enforcement starts using them, and also says that that same ordinance or resolution should identify community involvement opportunities for folks to have input into the development of those operational policies. So the proposed resolution that was attached to the agenda memo in your packet would meet those state law requirements. And not only will they authorize the police department to use the cameras, but it will also identify the additional opportunities for the community, and some of which Ms. Black mentioned, which is additional meetings with the public, council advisory, police advisory council, excuse me, and other stakeholder meetings. I've mentioned there are additional actions that will need to come before the council. So you may ask, why are you here now? And the reason is because this gives the council an opportunity, should you wish to do so, to timely weigh in on the community involvement, which is ongoing now and is consistent with the state law, which talks about having a resolution in place that identifies community involvement. So that is why we're here now seeking direction. But there will be a number of other actions that the council will need to take and decisions they'll need to make. If the council adopts a resolution as proposed, or a resolution, then the steering committee that was mentioned, made up of multiple departments who are affected by this program, will then move forward with the additional actions, which include negotiating with the unions, also negotiating a contract with a vendor, and further assessing staffing needs for multiple affected departments in order to implement the program. And then staff will be back at a later date to seek council's authorization of any agreement with the unions, any agreement with the vendor, and some additional staffing issues as well. So again, the request of council tonight is seeking direction to bring back at a future meeting a resolution that would authorize the use of body-worn cameras and identify additional community involvement opportunities. And we have, again, proposed a resolution for your consideration that would do those things. So with that, Chief Shirley, unless you have anything further, we can turn it to you, Mayor, for the council to ask questions and to provide some direction.
Thank you. Would you mind putting up the slide with the proposed resolution on it?
Do you have that, Kathy?
There wasn't a slide with the actual resolution.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
I thought it referenced it on the slide before this one, but maybe.
It referenced the statute. We can certainly, there you go.
There you go. Thank you. So any comments or questions? I see Deputy Mayor, followed by Councilmember Barksdale. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, it was mentioned earlier, but I want to personally thank Officer, I believe it was Lyles, Montgomery, and Whitaker yesterday for their heroic actions in Somerset and pulling out the couple and their dog from that house that had slid off that foundation. Just tremendous work there, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. Chief Shirley, great work, nearly close to 70% of the way there. And a big thank you to Megan as well for just the tremendous outreach and transparency that we are applying to what we were already doing as a police department with the data dashboard, the progress on the recommendations and the OIR report. It's just really great to see. And I also want to thank all those that were involved in that call that we had with the community. And it was so great. So many great questions on January 12th. And I think that's been one of the great benefits of this process as well, is that we've been able, and the police department's been able to really educate a lot of residents in the city in terms of, standard procedures and the training that you go through and the scenarios and the situations that officers encountered with, sometimes on a daily basis or sometimes not at all. But it's been great to really educate and inform, as well as given the progress that we've made, not only on the OIR report, but then also on the body worn cameras. So as was mentioned earlier, this is something that I'm tremendously proud of, because the police department's been working on this even before the OIR report came out. So that's how important that they think it is to get this up and going. And certainly based on that poll, although be it unscientific, certainly there's tremendous interest in it from the community to move forward. And I think it's a great way to protect residents as well as police officers. So I am in full support of the resolution and moving that forward tonight. And to continue that process to get that up and running by the end of the year. I think that's a great goal to be set, and can't wait till that is running in full steam ahead. So those are my comments. Again, thank you. No real questions, but thank you again, Chief Shirley and Megan, for the great presentation and all the great work as we continue to move forward on this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councilmember Barksdale, followed by Councilmember Lee.
All right. First, just thank you for the update and also your attention to getting through the recommendations, being at that 70%. And specifically on these recommendations, it looks like these are the ones that really can impact, someone's life. And so I really appreciate with the tasers and the back devices. So really appreciate the progress on these recommendations, in addition to the other ones, but especially these, and the community outreach. I am looking forward to the community feedback around the body worn cameras. I support it, obviously, and I support the resolution. Specifically interested in when you come back in the conversation around the release of body worn camera data and sort of what that might look like, how you'll balance transparency, which definitely want, but also the privacy of the people, in the footage. So I think they're both values that we just have to figure out how to balance, but support the transparency for sure. Question related, but tangentially, how, and maybe it's not related, but how do we prevent or we were talking about tasers today, and there was an incident in a different police department where the gun was pulled instead of the taser. Are there any policies or opportunities has there been any thinking about policies related to that, just to, mitigate that risk?
Yeah, Andrew, you want to speak to that? But I'll say this: when that incident occurred, probably like many police departments, we obviously needed to take a look at our own protocols, right, and to make sure that our training, our policies are in place that would certainly try and eliminate an incident from happening like that, a tragic incident. But Andrew, you can speak a little more to that.
Absolutely, sir. yes, that is absolutely something we take into our training. It's not just the training, but how the tool is worn on the belt as well to make sure that there is not a misidentification. That's why you'll see the taser worn on the opposite side of the body from where the gun is, as well as the training of what hand the taser is held in and how the officers transition. And that's something that we take very seriously here in Bellevue and make sure we integrate that into our training itself to try to reduce the likelihood of one of those instances occurring.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you both.
Okay, Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Zahn.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Well, job well done. Very impressive. 68% of the recommendation you already implemented or adopted. That's just amazing. Well, which is probably we expected anyway with the high standard, the quality of the Bellevue Police Department. But the fact that it's specifically you've accomplished it, and that's very commendable. So thank you. It's for the department, to you, and to the people that are involved with this. And I, for sure, definitely support this body camera recommendation. I'm looking at the languages, words in front. And the only question I have, I was thinking, well, when we adopt something, we always have to ask how much does it cost? What's the fiscal impact? But as I read that, there's no fiscal impact. And so I'm just curious, the way that you framed it, because you probably need to have our action in order to have community involvement and the fully process necessary to provide more support and information to make this work as well as it can be. Maybe that's the question, the reason. So you say you have to authorize the use of BWC prior to use. So I'm not quite clear on what is the timing and the piece I don't quite understand. We authorize you, so you are not going to start equipping your personnel yet, but you are just going to go through the process and go to do more information gathering, more assessment. Then you come back to us, right? And that's another process in front of us. So I just want a little bit of clarification. If you can do that for me, that'd be good. Thank you.
So Chief, do you want me to answer that or do you want to answer that?
You can start, Kathy, go ahead.
Sure. So yes, there will be a sequence of actions that will need to occur, Councilmember Lee. And so the actual use, the authorization of the use that the council would be giving if it were to adopt this resolution is contingent on additional future actions that the council will need to make. And those could include coming back with an agreement. If agreement is reached with the unions, the council would need to be involved in that. Also, in terms of we'll have to negotiate a vendor contract with a vendor to actually provide the body-worn camera, as well as some other issues, perhaps some staffing issues. And so all of those will come back. We will continue efforts to move those things forward if the council adopts this resolution, and then those decisions will come back to the council at a later time.
So there is a contingency. Okay, I understand. But when it comes back to us, do we have to have another approval, or just basically approval of the budget, approval of what? Maybe you can be a little bit more specific. I would assume, yeah, so if you can clarify that would be good.
So if there are, for example, agreements after collective bargaining agreements and negotiations with the unions, those agreements may need to come back to the council for approval. The agreements themselves, the same is true of a contract with the vendor. So to provide the actual, the contract that the vendor will then use to implement and provide us with the equipment and all the other things that go along with that, that would have to come back it's another example of something that would have to come back to the council as well.
Thank you. Now I understand. I'm still not quite sure if we need to do all that stuff instead of allowing the police chief and the police department, if we approve the use of it. In a way, it's just a process you go through. But if you prefer to go back to us again, I guess we probably can. And so our position, or at least mine, hasn't really changed, unless the process itself had come up with something that would have changed the thinking or have prevented us from doing the next step. But so I just wanted to lay that out, kind of clearly. But thank you for explaining. That's fine. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Robertson.
Yes, thank you. Well, I appreciate your due diligence in getting the recommendations implemented as well. I agree with my colleagues. It's so important to show steady progress in moving forward with the recommendations. And in addition, I also fully support the implementation of the body-worn cameras. The community engagement, I was on a plane when we had the outreach, so I think that is so important. What you talked about of both the what and the how, I think the process really matters. And the more that our communities understand, the better off we are. And I also appreciate the fact that what you talked about with recommendation number 34 was that we aren't just taking the recommendations at face value. If there is one where by publishing our tactical munitions that it puts us at a disadvantage, that we make that choice not to have that recommendation, and I support that. On the data dashboard, in addition to the Engaging Bellevue, will those dashboards be added to the annual report published by the police department? It seems like that would be a good addition to the report that we already generate every year. And then to Councilmember Lee's point, I think maybe I didn't completely understand. So we are pursuing getting the contract, negotiating with the collective bargaining, but there will be a point where, and hopefully before we discuss the budget, the next biennial budget, where we will understand the cost of inking that contract, purchasing the cameras, as well as the costs for maintaining the data. So I'm still a little unclear on that. So if you could maybe help me with the timing for that. And then lastly, the 15 remaining recommendations still to go. Can you talk a little bit about a summary of what they are? Are there some broad buckets of the remaining ones? And what do we expect to be the timing for when we are going to have vetted those recommendations as into our policies and procedures? Thanks.
Maybe we'll start with the last question first in terms of the 15 remaining. Joe, you want to give just a real general overview of what those are, and but to the question of timing, as we've been doing with all of these, we are being very intentional, to be frank, daily in terms of looking at each of them, the impact, right, the benefits, maybe there aren't some benefits for it, how it impacts other groups, and making sure that we are addressing them as quickly, quite frankly, as possible, so there's no real lag time. And so I think our goal is to have all of these done by June of this year, if not sooner. So we're being very intentional and aggressive about getting through all of these because we do think it will have a good positive impact on our policies and making sure we got best practices. So we've taken it serious from day one, and we're continuing to do so.
Great, thank you.
And Joe, just kind of generally what some of the last few are.
Sure, sir. And council members on, I appreciate the question. And we do have some buckets where a number of recommendations are going to be incorporated into policy. We expected to have more, to be honest, at this meeting, but there was some just last minute review that needed to occur. And so there's one policy that's going to affect 7 different recommendations that we have almost ready to go. And there's another policy regarding civil disturbance and First Amendment assemblies that's connected to one recommendation. We also have an officer-involved shooting policy that needs to be updated. It has been updated. There's a number of policies that we've got basically waiting in the wings to implement, but we still have to go through the process of review and final approval. So we don't anticipate that there may be some bargaining issues involved in some of those, and so we can't really predict exactly how long that's going to take. But we're hoping, by the next quarter to have the majority of these completed, if not all.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Councilmember Zahn, some of them are use of force, reporting requirements, de-escalation. When an officer responds to a call, there's certain information that he or she needs to make sure is in that report. De-escalation, was an opportunity to do that or not? And then there's a supervisory review portion of some of the policies as well that we will be requiring supervisors to review certain things. And that's all for training purposes, right? For another incident to make sure we're getting it right. There's also another recommendation as it relates to an early warning system for officers. And it's basically a threshold type system where if an officer begins to get 2, 3, 4 complaints, say hypothetically in a year, we pause, we take a look at the situations and see maybe there's a training issue there that the officer didn't get. Maybe there's some adjustment we need to make. And so that way, we can help the officer better serve the community. And as Joe said, officer involved shooting policies and civil disturbance. So that's kind of what's remaining. A few of them are kind of big ticket, and so we're going to have to take a deep dive into them, but we're certainly going to address them just as aggressively as we address the others.
Well, thank you for your thoughtfulness. From what I'm hearing, the very process of vetting them, we are better together.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Okay,
go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead, Mayor. I'm sorry. I didn't.
Oh, you finish up. Go ahead.
No, I know you had another question at the beginning that if you could repeat it, I didn't want to miss it.
I was re-asking maybe the question that from Councilmember Lee related to the budget timing and making sure that as we look at the cost to fully support the body-worn camera implementation, that we were going to have known cost in time for a biannual budget, or just reinforcing that question of, is that indeed the case?
Well, there's definitely a steering committee that certainly is going to have to review costs, right? And so the steering committee meets weekly, bi-weekly, and that process is still ongoing as well. So I can't say what exact time they will have a final cost, but the steering committee certainly is addressing that issue.
And again, I think as the chief mentioned, some of these precise timing is not totally within our control, but we're moving as quickly as possible with a goal towards middle of the year, third quarter of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Robertson, followed by Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you. This has been a really good discussion, and I really appreciate the detail and the critical thinking that's going into each of these recommendations and making sure that we implement them in the best way possible. As a follow-up, I feel like we're beating the dead horse, but I thought as far as the budget impacts of the body-worn cameras, I thought we appropriated some money for this program already. Didn't we?
Can I go ahead and weigh in here? And I speak. Can you hear me? This is
yes.
Brad.
Mm-hmm.
We did appropriate some money in the budget as a placeholder. And if I can, I'd like to call on Deputy City Manager Nathan McCommon to expand on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and yes, Councilmember Robertson and the others who were asking about the budgetary concerns. The council did approve some so that we could do the research and start to work on our policies. And as Chief Wendell Shirley pointed out, there's a steering committee committed to making sure that we have everything we need to know to be ready for the next budget cycle, so that we can fully fund with everything that we have knowledge of at that time. Our goal is to be ready by the end of the year for that budget process.
Super. That really helps clarify, because I did remember having this discussion last year or 2 years ago and making sure that we appropriated some money. To that end, I'm hugely supportive of the body worn camera program. And I would also, this is a regular meeting of the council. We absolutely can take action on that resolution tonight. It was in the packet. I would suggest that we do so that we can keep this process moving. So I support that. And then I just want to put a plug in, and if Chief Shirley or Brad or Nathan, if you have any input on this, in addition to looking at the budgetary costs of implementing the OIR report, of implementing the body worn cameras, we have been looking at how to plan for the growth that we have coming to Bellevue, both in terms of residential and business and the opening of light rail, all of which is going to make public safety a little bit more complicated need for keeping up with the level of service. So I know that when we did the police staffing study, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, part of the consultant purchase of that with that vendor was the algorithm to look at staffing. So I would like to just put a plug in for making sure that we're looking at our projected future staffing need for police, and that we use the algorithm that we paid for before, and that also be included, so that when we're looking at the police budget in the biennial update this year, we can look at not just the costs of the OIR report recommendations and not just the cost of body worn cameras, but how we want to see our police staffing grow and change. It's not just equipment, it's people too. It's the human capital, so that we can make sure that we have a police budget that really reflects the values of the Bellevue community, and that also keeps ahead of the growth. So I don't know if that's already, if that's already in the works. I'd love to hear about that. Otherwise, I'll just put a plug in so that you'll know that I will be asking for this as we move into budget time. Thanks.
Councilmember Robertson, this is Brad Miyake. You mentioned a key ingredient of what we're going to have to take a look at, and that's the growth of the city, which involves not only police, but probably every department in the city. So we will be prepared to bring something back to you this year to talk about not only the police, but other departments as well.
Great, I'm glad to hear it. And we'll use the algorithm for the police component of it, right?
That will be one ingredient to it, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's just one component.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
I think this has been a great conversation. I'm really excited and pleased with the progress we've made, and I think a very significant improvement of an already really, really good police department. I think we should be proud of that. And I want to assure that, we made great progress, and that we're on a path of continual improvement as we go along, because that's the way you learn and grow and become even better. I support absolutely the resolution for body cameras, and I agree with my colleague Councilmember Robertson that we should just go ahead and adopt that right now. I think that's really important for us to do this. On the questions been raised about maybe the funding or the cost of it, this is not an action that is going to be cost constrained. We have to do this, and I think we all agree we want to do this. And it's just a question. I thought it was really just a question when this comes up. So if we can get this done by the budget next year, that would be great. And I'm sure we're going to have it done in a very good, cost-effective manner. But I really appreciate a tremendous, it's hard to say this because we all believe based on what we've seen, that we have a really, really good police department. I think we're going to a great police department. There have been some substantial changes that have bring it into the more modern, action going forward. And I think there are a lot of other things that are still in the pipeline that will increase this and provide much, much better service to the public, which is what we want to do. And I also, one of the things you always have to keep in mind is that we have such a great working relationship with the fire department as well. So I think in public safety, we're just making some really strong steps forward. And it's great to see the leadership bringing us to this point. And as a council, we really support this, and we want to, move forward. So I'm excited about it, and ready to, as I said, ready to vote on a resolution to authorize the use of body cameras, body-worn cameras by the police department, and identify additional community involvement.
Thank you. So I'll make a comment and then we can have a motion after that. It seems sometimes it takes us a long time to get things done like this, important things, but boy, when we do them, I feel like we do such an excellent job. This has been a very thoughtful process. I've appreciated the community input. I've been participating, I think, in every community session that I've been able to, and it's just been remarkable, the different people that show up and the different comments and concerns and questions that are expressed there. And every time our staff is there, everybody is present, the city manager is there, our council members are there, and of course our police force is there and staff. And it's just, I'm so proud of our city and the work that we do. And I think that we've, taken quite a bit of time to get to this point. And I hear a lot of encouragement to just move this across the finish line so we can start implementation as soon as possible and budgeting for this. So with that in mind, I believe the deputy mayor has a motion that he can make that we can actually pass a resolution tonight. Is that correct, Deputy Mayor?
That is correct.
Okay, would you like to read that?
Certainly. I move to approve Resolution 10057, authorizing the use of body-worn cameras by the police department, consistent with any collective bargaining agreements and other necessary council actions, identifying additional community involvement opportunities.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody who's involved with this. We really appreciate it. This is very important work. And with that, I think we're at the end of our meeting. So I will call an end to this, and we'll see you all next Monday. Good night.
Good night.